Both seem to be easier. Um, and meditation, that's the other thing, to be able to attain and sustain the power of intentioned consciousness.
Thank you for that, Stefan. There are a couple of comments and questions in the chat that maybe you want to respond to. Here's one.
Sure. Let me see if I can.
Does it ever seem like the appearance of targets might have an agenda? In other words, if there is some sort of guiding hand from beyond, moving the viewers in an intentional, important direction to reveal some important information. And there is a comment with it. I understand as a viewer that there is a natural wow effect, what Ingo called ESP impact, that might make a person suggest there was a deeper meaning. However, after years of using real random procedures for target process, it seems like there's more to the picture as to which targets randomly appear. Have you had similar experiences?
Well, if I understand the question, and having known Ingo for, well, until he died, um, and by the way, in my course that I teach which you can get at Gladwing, I have a lecture by Ingo telling everything he knows about remote viewing. As far as I know, it's the only one that exists. Anyway, the kind of wow part is because of numinosity. You're tuning in to something which produces a strong emotional response in people that see it. That's why I said Chartres Cathedral is easier to see for a remote viewer than a physical French warehouse of the same size. Um, I think, as I said, I can't prove this because I haven't done enough experiments, but I have done some. And I know, for instance, that your biases affect your remote viewing. For instance, I did a study of twins, and one twin would go out and be the outbound person, outbound character, and the other twin would try to remote viewing. And I did a bunch of these, but one was I had a set of twins who were evangelical Christians and very passionate about it. And the target, there was a randomly selected target that one of the twins was told to go to. I was trying to see if twins did better than just randomly selected people. Anyway, so the place where this twin was sent to go it was Halloween. He was told to go to this place where there was like a haunted house kind of thing where they put together something that had what were supposed to be scary images, and around it were a lot of pumpkins with carved into, little faces carved into the pumpkins, like Halloween. And the twin who was the remote viewer had no trouble describing that his brother was at a kind of, he said it's like a dark house, and there are all these orange balls around it outside, but I can't go inside. I don't know why. I just can't get anything about it. And of course, it was his religious belief. He wasn't interested in pictures of the devil and things, the kind of things you see at Halloween shows. And he just couldn't describe it. And I saw several of those sorts of situations. So it's clear that your emotional, intellectual biases do have an effect on your ability to remote view.
So there's a related comment on intentionality that's sort of maybe the positive side of what you were just talking about, where bias becomes an obstacle, but where, intentionality might have a positive effect in healing.
Oh, yes. Yes. Well, if you're talking about healing, therapeutic intention, that's a different subject. Therapeutic intention, like the ability to open to non-local consciousness, dates back thousands of years. We know, for instance, from the archaeological evidence that the Neanderthals had some idea of the continuity of consciousness and also had some idea about therapeutic intention. Now, I've done a lot of studies on therapeutic intention. One study, for instance, showed that when you ask people to do healing and they had little bottles of ultra pure hermetically sealed water on their hands, you can get the papers on this, by the way, by going to academia.edu or ResearchGate. But anyway, I set up a healing experiment.
Did you get me two Tylenol?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Stephen. Stan was speaking. Just go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Stan, you go ahead.
No, that did not pertain to what you were saying.
Oh, all right. Well, then, should I go back to healing?
Yeah, just please keep talking.
Okay. So anyway, I organized this experiment because I wanted to see if you look at the historical history of therapeutic intention, and you think for a moment about why are water and wine prayed specifically over? Are they just symbolic materials, or does something happen? So to find that out, I did two experiments I'll describe very quickly. The first experiment was, which I did back in the late 60s, 1960s. I got bottles of wine. I bought 2 bottles of wine. I did this 7 times with 7 people each time. Anyway, I got a bottle of wine, 750 milliliters, and I split it into 2 parts, into 2 little containers, 2 bottles. And I randomly selected one of the bottles to be treated and the other to be controlled. Now, it's exactly the same bottle of wine. And I took the bottle that was designated using a random number generator to be treated to a meditation group. And I said, would you please focus your meditation on this bottle of wine? Which they did. And then I would go to a friend, another person, and say, listen, I'm about to make a big wine buy, and I'm down to 2 bottles of wine. Would you invite 7 people to a wine tasting and have them taste these 2 bottles of wine and tell me which bottle is the better bottle? So, because I'm going to spend some money buying it. Now, again, same bottle of wine, 1 bottle had been treated with therapeutic intention. They all, I think we did it, I can't remember the exact statistic, but overwhelmingly, they picked the bottle that had been treated by being in the focus of meditation. That's one experiment. So that, I think, is why wine plays a role in communions, because when the priests pray over it, focus intention on it, that it changes the substance. And Dean Radin did another experiment some years later in which he used chocolate, and he had Buddhist monks focus on some of the chocolate and not on some of the controlled chocolate. They just randomly split them up. And he had very similar results. People felt happier who ate the chocolate that was treated. And I got interested also, as I said, in water. So I designed an experiment, carried it out, in which I had a laboratory prepare ultra pure water, which they put into little sealed glass bottles like they would use in a hospital. And I had people meditate on, I randomly assigned the bottle either control or treated. So I had these controls, and then I would take the untreated bottles, these little bottles, and I put them on the palms of people using a little cotton sleeve that tied it to their hands for one bottle for 5 minutes, and then I'd change it, second bottle for 10 minutes, then I'd change it, third bottle for 15 minutes. And they would, people volunteered who had physical problems, and they would come in and heal them, and they'd do the 5-minute bottle, the 10-minute bottle, the 15-minute bottle. And then the bottles would be put in a plastic ring, so there was nothing that emphasized their order. And they would be taken to another building and tested using infrared spectrophotometry. And they would be tested twice, once by one spectroscopist, and he would then leave the room, and the second spectroscopist would come in not knowing anything about what the first one had done, and using a device to do infrared spectrophotometry, they would change it. And what they found, and it was quite significant, was that I had several hypotheses. One hypothesis, I thought the longer the bottle is treated, the more likely it is to be changed. That turned out not to be true. But that there would be a difference between the treated bottles that had been on the palms of their hands. They didn't touch the water, but these little sealed bottles, and as compared to the control bottles. And I also had a control bottle hidden away in the room where they did it, and we checked that. And what we found was the bottles that were the focus of healing intention had a different, it changed the molecular structure of the water. And that there was also a change, although not as great, for the control bottle hidden away in the room, which I think is what telling us how spaces become spiritual. And I did another experiment with that as well, and showed the same thing, that in rooms where people meditate and hold healing intention, those spaces take on an informational structure change, which makes them stand out from ordinary spaces that are the same. And when I was involved with Hopi, they use kivas and to do these ceremonies, which I was able to witness. And those spaces become sacred spaces. And the same thing is true in cathedrals. So it's not specific. It's not specific to any particular religion. It's that when you focus intentioned awareness, you literally change the nature of reality. And Roger Nelson, who's done one of the most brilliant experiments for years, did this thing called the Global Consciousness Project. And what he had random number generators spread out all over the world that people were running. And what he discovered was that when there were events which occurred, which coalesced emotionally people's intention, Nelson Mandela's death, Princess Diana's death, major events that caused large numbers of humans to focus on something, that the random number generators went non-random. So if you think about that, you understand that what Max Planck was trying to tell us is correct. That consciousness is causal and fundamental, and that space-time arises from consciousness. So once you begin to think of the world that way, you also begin to understand why all religions emphasize making the choice that fosters well-being. You know, Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, they all in their teachings talk about fostering well-being for strangers, you know, the stranger who helps the person, whatever. And the reason is because when you foster well-being through the choices that you make, and this actually is the most important thing I'm going to say today, when you are, of the choices available to you every day, you make lots of little bitty choices that you don't even think about. But if you always make a point of choosing the most compassionate, life-affirming, and fostering well-being choice, that you will make a difference in your society. This is how Gandhi got independence for India without a war. This is how Nelson Mandela ended apartheid in South Africa. This is how Martin Luther King got the civil rights, got Lyndon Johnson to sign the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. Because, and Rensselaer Polytech Institute has demonstrated this in another way, when 10% of any population, whatever, changes its consciousness, the whole population, whether it's a school, a church, a community, or a nation, when 10% change their consciousness, the whole community, whatever size it is, has to change its consciousness as well. And you know, an example of that is when I was a young boy, you went to somebody's house, on the coffee table, there would be an ashtray and a pack of cigarettes. You never see that anymore. It's not that anybody passed a law against it. It's that 10% of the population recognized the medical research about the dangers of smoking and decided not to do it. And the whole culture, even people who didn't even think about smoking, paralleled it. So if we want to become agents of change in our society, the way you do that, and it has nothing to do with how much money you've got or what religion you are or what race you are or what gender you are, when 10% of the population always consistently chooses of the options available, even though some of them, they may not be great, but there's always one that's better, that is the most compassionate, life-affirming, and fostering of well-being. You are working to create a different society, one that expresses well-being. And
Stephen,
given what we are going through as a country now, I think that's very important.
well, I really appreciate your hopeful and inspirational note here. It is so important, and I'm glad that you concluded with that. I want to give both Stanley and Stephan a moment here for any final words, because we're over time and we will stop in a couple of minutes. So Stanley, you will need to unmute. I want to invite you and then Stephan also for some final comments here. And we will post the video, and I will talk with Stephan which other materials we might put on the website. There's a request for your PowerPoint. You and I can talk about how we might do that in a way that is okay for you. So Stanley, any final words? You need to unmute, Stan. You're muted. You need to unmute. Stan, you need to unmute.
No, you're still muted, Stan. Press the little microphone at the bottom of the window.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
All
There
right.
you go.
Excellent.
Both Stephan and I have emphasized the point that consciousness is fundamental. And this is not only in parapsychology, but you see it in physics. You see it in anthropology. You see it in cosmology. And consciousness is not only fundamental, but consciousness is unitary, connecting. You might say that this love is fundamental. And I think this is a good point that I would like to leave our audience with.
Thank you, Stan. Stephan, any final words here as we're concluding?
Well, the only thing I would say to you is that just to add to the point that Stanley just made, science in many, many disciplines now has discovered that all life has consciousness because it is an expression of consciousness. We know that fungi have consciousness. We know that butterflies have consciousness, that octopuses have consciousness, that gorillas have consciousness. I mean, the papers come out over and over, and what they're all telling us is that we live in a matrix of consciousness. And we are players, and you can be an influential force regardless of who you are, your money, your race, your gender, any of that, by making choices that foster well-being. And if you decide to do that, very interesting things happen.
Thank you, Stephan. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your video. Stanley, thank you for being here, and everybody else. I really appreciated all the well-informed questions and comments here. This was a very rich conversation, and we will post materials on our website within the next couple of weeks. We will gather again in a month with Stanley, and that event is going to be on ayahuasca, Vine of the Souls. So, Stephen, thank you for taking the time, Stanley, and I wish everybody a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.